All right, so I've got all the kind of sheathing cut back here. Now we're going to work on cutting the siding back here. So what I've done is I went downstairs, I figured out my measurements, so I went over to the window over there, I brought one of them up, and I figured out all my measurements to the inside of my J channel and to the outside of my fin. I'm trying to create reference points to make all my measurements from my rough opening. So my width of my J channel is 3/4 of an inch. I'm gonna take about 1/4 of an inch out because I want to leave myself a little bit of a fudge factor in there. So I basically am calling that 1/2 of an inch that I'm gonna add to the measurements. So I cut these, just these scrap pieces of wood here to my width. So this is actually the width that I need to cut my siding out to, the hole in my siding. And now I'll just center it up in this opening here, get it nice and centered, figure out where center is, and then I'll use that to mark the width of my siding. I'll make one mark and then I'll use the level and I'll mark it all the way up and make sure that it's perfectly plumb and set my level off of that. And that'll be where I'll mark to cut all of my siding out, cut my hole out of my siding. And once I have that done, then we're good to go ahead and start taping off the openings, doing our building our flashing pan, basically out of I'm using zip tape to build a flashing pan inside the opening here. And yeah, so that's basically what we're going to be doing here, and we'll get started on that now. So, all right, so I'm cutting out the siding around the outside here. As you can see, I've still got to cut that siding over there back. I have done this siding here. That's all cut back. There's going to be a cellular PVC 1x4 that will sit against this, and then I'm going to tuck some zip tape up underneath this joint here and flash it all right, and then we'll also tuck some zip tape up and tuck it over the top of this so any water that comes in will come out and go underneath this little piece right here. And then obviously the top piece I took it out entirely because it was just a very thin strip. So we will I'll rip it down and put a new piece, I'll put it back in once I'm all done. And that will let me get my head flashing done properly on the top, and get it all taped off to the house wrap so that it's all properly waterproofed and layered properly. You can see my line here where I've marked it. So that's the next step. All right, so I'm going to show you the detail here on the zip tape flashing. So what I'm doing is we pulled this piece back, and I'm actually lapping the zip tape over this course of siding underneath it. So what will happen is if any water hits that trim and goes up underneath, it's not going to get behind the house wrap. It'll actually lap out over the side. And then over here, I'm kind of doing it in little 10-inch or so strips, shingling it up as I go. It's just easier to manage a smaller strip than it is a bigger strip. And I lapped that piece over the edge of the siding there, and then we'll just keep working our way up. This is taped to the house wrap, and then this is taped to the sheathing. The flange will cover this, and then we'll put another piece of tape over top of the flange to stick to this piece of tape so that it'll keep all the water out. I did that all the way across. We'll work our way all the way up the sides, and then when we get to the top, we'll actually lap the house wrap over top of the head flashing and the tape as well. So that's how it'll be done up there. All right, so I wanted to detail this. So I just finished creating the waterproofing dam. This sill is actually pitched forward just a little bit. That way any water might run backwards. So what I did, the first thing I did, as you can see over here, I don't have the zip stretch tape. That stuff's pretty awesome, but this stuff has a little stretch to it. So I ran a piece, you can see a full piece here. What we did is we did our bottom piece like I showed you before. I shingled it all the way up the sides, I did the middle here, all the way up the middle, and then I did my top, all the way across the top, and I tucked the tape up behind the house wrap there. And then what's gonna happen is the head flashing over the window is also going to tuck up behind that house wrap. So that house wrap will lap over the head flashing that goes over the top of the window. That way any water that might get behind will drip out and go over the top of the window. So the way I'm doing this here is I put a full, you can see a piece here, and I ran a piece, I just did it about halfway across. So you could do a full piece of it. Walker, shut up! Dog barks at everything. And then you do a full piece here, and then I just cut a slit here. Now what I'm gonna do is actually cut a piece to run up the side here and wrap around, and then we're gonna cut a little piece and kind of stretch it into that corner to cover up that little gap. And this tape is so sticky, it sticks to itself, like it's awesome. So that's how we're gonna detail this. And as you can see there, I kind of went up the side, just, I don't know, about 4 or 5 inches up the side. And basically we have like 2 layers of tape on the bottom. We're gonna do the same thing here, finish it out. And once all that taping is done, I am ready to go ahead and install the window, which is the fun part because we're high off the ground. My father-in-law's here at the house to help me out with this process. I'm gonna have to set up an extension ladder, go up here, put it into place. It's gonna be quite interesting. We'll see how it goes. So that's the plan. And that other here's. Work. All right. Okay.
Okay, well, that's fine.
You got the rope.
I mean, truth be told, I'm letting go of the window if it falls. I think I might be able to catch a window. Crazy people.
Okay. All right. Before we pull it all the way back, let's make sure it's centered.
Does that mean me?
Yeah. And then I gotta put some shims underneath it.
I got
So
it.
grab those shims on the counter, Becky.
It's
I
hard
got a
to,
lot of airspace over on the side,
it's hard to tell center when it's not in all the way.
down at the bottom.
And when we pick it up, all right, put it all the way in the corner, Becky. Like right over there. Okay, cool. And then pick up that one.
It's an awful thick one there.
Okay. Okay. Check the air gap on either side.
I got an air gap, but I don't know.
We're about even. That's about even.
If we're not pulled in, probably it'll disappear when we pull it in.
Yeah.
There it goes.
You're even.
So I'm up here on the ladder. I'm going to take a little bit more detailed video of how we flash this window. So the first thing I did was Unfortunately, this little strip broke off that I was trying to keep on there. We're gonna have to stick it back on there just to make it look finished, because our finished trim is gonna come down to right here, but no big deal. We'll make it look nice. It'll look fine at the end of the day. But basically what we did is I actually took the zip tape and I lapped it up over this course of siding. As you can see here, it's gonna be, when we put that other piece of siding, it's gonna cover this, so you're not gonna see this piece of zip tape. And the reason that we did that is because this is a new window being added in. I wanted any water that might potentially get, maybe enter this joint right here. When it comes down, I want it to come up over this course of siding and not continue to run down the face of the house wrap. So we lapped this bottom course of siding first with tape, and then I came over top of that with the other course of tape, and then I created my dam inside, or not my dam, but my flashing pan, my pan flashing or whatever, with zip tape on the inside, so that if any water does for some reason get inside this frame, and sometimes these vinyl frames will crack and water can get it. So if water does get inside this window, it has a way out right here. So the flashing on the inside and the sill pan will keep the water from entering into the the wood framing and rotting the wood framing, and then it'll actually, and the sill pan is pitched just ever so slightly to allow the water to run out. So then the water can run out the bottom of this flange. You never want to tape this bottom flange here. You want to leave it open, and I also did not silicone the bottom of this flange here, but I did run a bead of silicone underneath the window nailing fin before we installed the window, and then I taped over the top of it here. And before I installed the window, I also ran zip tape and tucked it up behind the siding here and lapped it and stuck it to the house wrap. So there's a continuous seal from the house wrap to the tape, and then we stuck this new tape over this flange to the old tape, which this zip tape to zip tape sticks like crazy. Like, that's not coming loose. And then we shingled it. So I came up the middle and I worked my way up to the top, and then I taped up there at the top and tucked my tape up underneath. You can see where I cut a flap of the house wrap there, and I tucked the tape right up underneath that, stuck it to there. And then when we put our metal head flashing on top, we'll tuck it up behind that as well, and we'll tape the head flashing to that zip tape that's up there right now. And then the house wrap will lap over the head flashing, and then we'll stick the piece of siding back on, and that way if any water comes in behind or on top, it will just lap out over top of the head flashing and come down over the top of the window and run down the course of the siding here. So that's how the window is sealed properly. Again, all these, I siliconed the nailing fin to the house, or I put a bead of silicone on the house and then stuck the nailing fin into it and then nailed it off. We nailed it off basically like every other nail here. We just used some roofing nails here. Those are like I think 1 3/4 or maybe a 2-inch roofing nail. Nailed those off there. Those have a nice flat head there to hold it real good. Nailed it off every other hole there. You don't really need to do every single hole. So it's siliconed in there, and it's nailed off all the way around and on the top. Obviously you can see that pane's broken. I got my glass repair guy coming out here in a couple days to change that pane out with a new one that's not cracked. So that's what we did, folks. All right, so I started trying to foam here on the inside. You want to leave a little bit of a gap on the outside there. You basically want to foam up to the edge of that plastic flange in there, if you can see it. The foam is to create a sealing from the interior, but you don't want to seal all the way out to the edge, because you want to leave some room in case any water might get in there. It can run down and go down in the bottom there and get out. Unfortunately, I have a bad can of foam, I think, because sometimes you get a can of foam and it doesn't have enough propellant in it, and it just like barely fizzles out of the can. And I think that's what I've got going on here with this particular can. It also hasn't really, it's still kind of like, it didn't cure right. So I'm gonna have to go back, return that can, and I looked at it, it's actually expired. So I'm gonna have to go return the can and go get another one. But the windows are in. All right, so I put all the drywall up this morning. Oop, let's zoom it out there. So we'll go over here, and as you can see, I just put I put the tape coat on the drywall there. Used paper tape in the corner, and then everywhere else I used Fibofuse. Fibofuse is awesome, so much easier to work with. Just used some quick set 20-minute hot mud for the tape coat, and went ahead and just finished that up, and then we'll get started here. I'll let it dry for about an hour, and then I'll come back and I'll put a second coat with the 20-minute mud, and then my final coat I'll use just regular joint compound. So I put the drywall up this morning, hung it up. It was pretty easy. I just one long piece across the bottom, one long piece across the top, piece down the side there, piece down the side there. I didn't worry about putting the piece in the middle here, only because this center stud is protruding out just a little bit, so it would make that piece rock back and forth. And plus, this is going to get covered by a piece of trim anyways. I'll put it. I'm trimming, molding this whole out, so that'll get one solid piece of trim over it, so you're never going to notice it anyways. And then I will show you in more detail the trim profile that I'm doing. Alright, so it's nighttime here, 9 o'clock. Kids are in bed now. Finished all the drywall mud today, so I hung the drywall this morning. I guess about 11, 12 o'clock, I put the tape coat of mud on. I used 20-minute easy sand, 20-minute hot mud is what they call it. Did the tape coat. Came back, I guess, about 3 o'clock and put the second coat in. If you've never used hot mud before, put the first coat on. If you've never done a whole lot of drywall mudding, less is more. And then come back with your knife, just knock off the high spots. You don't need to sand it. Do the second coat, feather it out about 3-4 inches further away than you did the top coat. So then about 3 o'clock today, I put the second coat on, kind of feathered that all out. I went basically all the way up to the edge of the crown molding. And so when I did my second coat, I kind of came down my joints about right there. So went all the way up to the crown, and then came down a little bit, and then came out. My seam for my drywall is actually right here where my finger is. So you can see how much further I feathered it out. So about 3 o'clock I did another set of 20-minute hot mud. I did my second coat and then let that dry for about an hour, and then I came back and just used regular joint compound. Use this stuff here that I got from Lowe's. Just regular pre-mixed lightweight joint compound, and then I watered that down just a little bit and did the final coat. And each time, so if you've never done it before, I do my taping with a 4-inch knife. I do my second coat with this 8-inch knife, and then I do my final coat with the big knife. Oops, making all kinds of noise here. So I do my final coat with that knife. So, and I highly recommend these stainless steel pans over the plastic ones. Plastic ones suck. Don't buy plastic ones, get the stainless steel ones. So yeah, I feathered out the final coat here this evening about after dinner. Put that all in, and got it all feathered out. So now all I got to go back tomorrow is just sand it